Well, hello, we are in the front of my house. It's the front porch area. It's kind of that big impact area. It's what you see as you drive in and as I sit on the front porch. And you know, if you're like me, every so often you have to reassess what something is looking like. Maybe it's not giving you the feeling you are wanting. And also as I go along, I always try to make sure I start thinking about more water tolerant or water-wise things that can handle more drought conditions, just because our summers seem to get drier sometimes and we have maybe more periods where we don't get even rainfalls. So once something is established, what can handle those conditions? And I'm trying to think about this front and think of it in a new way. So along my whole front here, you can see that kind of in the back against the front porch, I have some little lime hydrangeas. They're starting to get some size to them. They're starting to get some good color and height and the shapes kind of that I'm wanting. And in front of them, and they've been a long time coming, I have some, these are a winter green boxwood, which is a little bit different type of boxwood. It has a smaller leaf. It's not quite as glossy. And right now the spiders just make these wonderful webs all over them. But I am slowly trying to get them all to be a certain size to match some that were existing. And they're slowly coming into that. But then in front of them, it's just kind of looking blah, kind of looking ick. So I'm starting to look through some of my Stachys that were there, which is like a lamb's ear. And when I put them in a few years ago, I like them, but some of them were mislabeled and they're getting flowers on them. And I don't want the lamb's ear to get flowers because once they bloom, they die out because they're kind of spent. And I want more of the ones that have just beautiful foliage and stay big, which is of course, I have some here. And this is exactly what I mean. See how these ones are just beautiful. They're Helen von Stein, and they get nice, big, beautiful, soft leaves and are prized and grown for their foliage, not for the blooms. So I'm switching some things out, taking some things that aren't doing well, and I'm adding in some color. I know, if you follow me, you know I'm usually more of a texture person, but the reason a lot of people love a Nepeta, which this is just a perennial, and a lot of times the old-fashioned one gets really big and leggy, but this one is called cat's pajamas, which, who thinks of these names? I always want to think about that. But what's great about this Catmint is that it stays smaller. It has a smaller leaf. It has a more upright bloom and a more profuse bloom. So I'm really excited actually to add some color into my front porch. And what's wonderful about these, they can be somewhat drought tolerant. So they do really well in our kind of harsh heat, humidity summers in Iowa. They can do well. So when you're planting perennials, usually what I do first is intermingle with some kittens that are behind me. But I also like to kind of lay things out and see where I'm going to put them. So I've been kind of slowly placing them around, kind of knowing where I'm going to put them. And anytime you're going to plant anything, I think it's something we don't often think about. It's always good to read whatever take it is if you're not used to it, and look at the sizing on it. So right now you can see it's pretty small and it's going to fit anywhere, but always look to what it grows. This one does stay smaller, but you want to space them at least 18 inches apart. So while it looks small, I like to take that into account and see how many I'm going to need and how much area they're going to cover. So I'm going to start placing these around, and I'm then going to take out the remaining plants that I'm going to compost, the ones that aren't doing well. You know, sometimes in the garden, I don't know if we need to give ourselves permission, but it's okay to say no to a plant. And it's okay to say, you know what? I'm giving my time to something else that's gonna do more happiness for me. So I'm gonna take out a few remaining ones, place these out, and then we'll start planting. So what I'm doing is, you can see I've already put in a lot of the Nepeta. I'm putting about, spacing them where they're not gonna quite touch because I'm gonna put a Stachys in between each one. But just like any perennial, when you dig a hole, a lot of people say, do I need to throw fertilizer in it? It never hurts to amend it slightly if you need to. You always want the plant to get used to your native soil. So if you need to put an amendment in, like a compost or something like that, up to 25% with your then native soil. I always top dress my beds in compost, if not every year, every other year. And I like to do that because I think it adds a lot of natural nutrients and a lot of good nutrients. So when I put them in, I already know I have lots of compost in my soil. And I admit, in Southeast Iowa, we have beautiful, loamy, dark soil. So it always looks kind of nice. So when you get a perennial, this one isn't too root bound, but I always take off a little bit of the bottom. You want to stimulate new root growth, just like you would with a tree, a shrub. I want to kind of break up those roots a little bit when they're young and they're easy to separate, just so they're stimulated and want to start branching out into your soil. What's wonderful about Nepeta, not only is it pretty, it's deer resistant, it's rabbit resistant. They don't like the smell of it, and so it deters them. And so if you do have those problems, It's a great plant to add because it gives you the blooms that aren't gonna get eaten off. So in between the Nepetas, I wanna put some Stachys. Now, look at this big, beautiful Helen von Stein. Those big ears, this one is a lot more root bound. See all those roots? I think a lot of people get scared, but you know what? I go in there, I really rip them up, which looks scary, but it isn't. Then what I also do is I'll look at this one and I'll say, you know what? There is no reason we cannot split this. You don't have to, you can plant it like this, but hey, if you want them to go farther, guess what? Perennials grow pretty quickly. I like to take my spade, I will just separate them slightly. You just wanna look for where is a natural break. So if you come in here and you can see, look at all these, there's actually about 3 plants in this one. 1, 2, 3. I'm not gonna break them into 3, but I will break them easily into these 2. And see then there how there's such nice even middle kind of to it. So you can either take a spade or a shovel. You can also just take a knife. If you would have a garden knife like a hori, you can break them open. And now I have 2 instead of 1. So I'm gonna put these in between. We're gonna keep planting. We'll talk about watering and look at the instant transformation it will have. So obviously after you plant anything, the big thing is what? To water. So especially, do you notice what I'm doing? I'm planting these in the heat of the summer. So this week we have heat indexes up until like over 100 degrees. It's hot. It does not mean you cannot plant. It means you have to watch your plants more. Things can dry out quicker. They can get stressed quicker. But if they're sitting in a container like this in a nursery, they can sit in the ground at your house. You just have to watch them. So what I make sure to do is water deeply when I water. And that means possibly up to a gallon sometimes per perennial, but it also means you want to check and make sure they're drying out in between those waterings. So if you want to get down to it and put a finger down in a couple spots around it and make sure it's dry. If it's still wet, you don't need to water it because you can overwater a plant too. So make sure it's dried out before you water it, but then water it deeply where it can go down into the ground. Let it dry out in between. So unless you get an inch of rain a week, does not count as a watering, and you're gonna need to definitely water that week, sometimes multiple times. So check your plants. Once these are established in a year or a little bit more, they're gonna be wonderful plants. They're gonna be water friendly in the sense they don't need as much water. Deer, rabbits won't bother them, which is wonderful. So as always, this stuff is inspiration to hopefully excite you and invigorate you to go outdoors and have fun in your garden. You can do that in multiple ways. And how do I hope you do some of it? Is share this video around, because yeah, it helps me of course, but it helps so many people see that gardening is doable. If this Iowa Farm Boy can do it, I know you all can do it, and it can be fun. So check it out. Go to my website, wiseguide.com, for tips, for tricks, or recipes, whatever you need. And until then, I'm gonna keep watering.